Right, John Brewin, good morning to you. How you doing?
Good morning, lads. How are you?
Who will Southgate pick?
Well, I think Sareth, I don't think he's going to pick Jack Wilshere, as Kevin was saying just there. I don't know if you've read the interesting snippet in the London Times this morning. Matt Hughes, an excellent journalist, was saying that when Wilshere went to the last couple of friendlies for England, he withdrew officially with a knee injury, but actually his fitness was not up to the standards that Southgate required. So, you're looking at that ahead of a tournament. Can Jack Wilshere last what potentially could be a 6-7 game tournament? You'd have to say not. Also, just on that Kevin clip, the player that Kevin described perfectly, he perfectly described the player that Jack Wilshere used to be, especially during that breakthrough. But the player I see now playing for Arsenal is more the provocateur, gets stuck into tackles. He's lost that yard of pace to carry him away from other tackles. It's a real shame. England do need a creative midfielder. You look through the other players that reported have been picked. Nobody has the gifts that Wilshere, you've got to say, used to have. But he's not going to be on that plane. He knows that now. That's all out there. That's all out there.
What? So just go back to him withdrawing from the squad for those friendlies. England didn't believe that he was fit enough to last the 90 minutes in terms of his physical fitness or in terms of his knee holding up to the strain of playing 90 minutes?
Well, the inference I got, I might be incorrect about this, is that there was a knee problem, but it was actually his overall fitness. Right. So, listen, Jack Wilshere is, how long ago is it? He made his breakthrough in 2010 or in 2018. Now, he's probably lost 3 years of his career through injury. If you actually consider it, last season he spent at Bournemouth, and by the end of that season, he wasn't even in their first team. This is a player who sadly degenerated through, it's got to be, he had ankle problems, he had foot problems, and then if he's getting knee problems, that tends to be a byproduct of other problems that he has. Sadly, injuries, conditioning, whatever it is, have let a potentially great career go awry. And, with it all change at Arsenal, you do wonder about his future.
It does seem as well with Jack Wilshere and Joe Hart, there's a sense of baggage around them, and it's not so much what they can actually bring, but the perception around them. And it seems like Gareth Southgate is very keen on going into a major tournament with England without added baggage.
Yeah, that's a good point. If you were to read some of the coverage of Joe Hart, written by, I'm going to politely call them his cheerleaders, they will tell you that Joe Hart is a great character to have around the dressing room. And from what I understand, he can be that, but he certainly is an ego. Now, let's face it, if the number one goalkeeper having an ego, that's accepted in football. But the number 3 goalkeeper, a guy that's not going to play, that's a big problem. So in Joe Hart's case, I think it was thought he's not even in the top 2 goalkeepers. There's no real point in taking him. And also, having said that, there is the idea that I've heard is that Southgate did want to take Hart, was considering him, still felt he was a good enough goalkeeper. Then unfortunately went to watch him play for West Ham, and I think the performance against Burnley was indicative, and that was pretty much the end of that.
That's unfortunate when your manager goes to watch you play and it turns out you're just as crap as you look on TV.
Absolutely, yeah.
But apparently it's David Moyes' fault. That's what some of the newspapers are suggesting today, that he's got a case against David Moyes for his being dropped by the England manager. I made the point earlier that this is actually Joe Hart blaming everybody else repeatedly, and that's what we've come to expect from him. He was clearly fabulously gifted, the perfect prototype for a goalkeeper, but it doesn't look like he had the application or the football intelligence to get the most out of those physical gifts.
Yeah, that's right. When we think of Joe Hart's problems as a goalkeeper, the first one is that how often is he beaten to the left-hand side? That's the weakness that people talk about all the time. The second thing is the fact that Pep Guardiola arrived at Manchester City, took, let's say, I was going to say one look at him, maybe 2 or 3, and decided that he wasn't the goalkeeper of Manchester City. Now, there's 2 things there. There's one that the Joe Hart, the big character, Pep Guardiola wanted people who perhaps wouldn't be disruptive. And also there's the fact that goalkeeping has changed, and goalkeeper needs to be able to play the ball out and so on. And Hart, it is said, was not particularly receptive to that. So Manchester City went down the Claudio Bravo route, and that's another story. But yes, if we go to David Moyes, David Moyes is a manager of a team that is trying to stay in the Premier League, has a pretty weak squad. He, as is pretty well documented, he hasn't had a lot of money spent on his team. And they've actually got a good goalkeeper in Adrian, a pretty serviceable goalkeeper who played very well for Sam Allardyce in particular at West Ham, and he chose Adrian as the goalkeeper. Now, I think that when Joe Hart went to West Ham on loan from Manchester City, he thought he'd be first choice goalkeeper. But as we mentioned with the Gareth Southgate thing, if you're not playing well enough, you don't deserve to be in the team. It's simple as that.
We can, if Jack Wilshere is at Arsenal next season, it's all up in the air this week regarding who his manager might be. It might actually be a former teammate of his in Mikel Arteta, which I think when this story first developed, I think people took a little bit of a step back. But suddenly, since Massimiliano Allegri has sort of ruled himself out of the picture because of the management structure at Arsenal, it seems that inexperience is going to be the only thing that will get you into that Arsenal job, because once you look around the club, once you see the structure of the club, you start to think to yourself, oh God, this could be a nightmare job. Mikel Arteta, is he ready for this?
Well, a manager, let's call him, can we call him a manager yet? He's actually not, he's managed no professional games as far as I can gather. But the guy that takes this job on is stepping into the shoes of someone who managed the club for 22 years, a club icon and all that. And as so often in football management decisions, he's the exact opposite of what Arsenal appointed or had before. Now, I think we've known over the last few months that Arsenal's, I suppose, structure has been growing around Arsene Wenger to the point where eventually he was shoved away from it, that he would no longer have a part in the club. And I think the Allegri thing is interesting because it does look like Allegri... They're never going to admit that Allegri was first choice, but the fact that negotiations are taking place with a manager who has won, is it 4 titles in a row now?
4 doubles
in Italy. I think it might even be 4 doubles in a row. That is a top-grade manager. He's been to the Champions League final. And then suddenly they end up with Mikel Arteta. You've got to say that Arteta is the second choice there, haven't you? You have to say that. So what you've got is, you've almost gone for the opposite of Allegri, because Allegri is a guy who wants to perhaps run the club from top to bottom, although will be used to a sporting director structure, having worked in Italy. But what he thought, it would seem that the structure at Arsenal was too overbearing for even someone used to work in the Italian structure to work in. So essentially, Arsenal are trying to reinvent the wheel a little bit by getting a coach in who is inexperienced, but learned at the feet of such great managers as Pep Guardiola, Arsene Wenger himself. He also learned under Alex McLeish, David Moyes. And, it does seem to me that they are taking a risk, but Arteta as an individual is said to be one of those people who had set out for management some years ago, a pretty forceful character, despite the fact he seems quite placid. And, is said to have the grit and determination to make it as a manager. Now, it does seem to me at that point you're talking about some kind of Pep Guardiola light option, and I think many clubs have looked at that over the years. But Arsenal are taking a hell of a risk here. The idea is that after the Wenger thing, it's the top 6. They can't really fall below the top 6, so it's something of a shot to nothing for the next manager, because of how badly things have gone for Arsenal. But, I've been to Arsenal quite a bit. I know the way things go. When things start going badly, even going back to before the Arsene Wenger days, the criticism does start to rain down. So that's a hell of a pressure job for someone to take on first time out.
Yeah, for sure. I think as well, when you look at you mentioned the risk there and that Arsenal potentially can drop out of the top 6. Well, Like, I mean, you look at Manchester United and the risks they took with David Moyes and how low they fell. I mean, if Arsenal were to succumb to some sort of similar thing, it would be a disaster to club. But we want to stay with the London clubs for just a moment, and we want to move on to Chelsea, because Eden Hazard is dominating the back pages this morning. He's saying that Chelsea need to buy big this summer if he is going to renew his contract at the club. And I was making the point a little bit earlier on in the show that if you remove hindsight from the situation that Chelsea were in last summer and you look at the signings they did make, I'm sure Hazard was looking around the dressing room in August, looking at the likes of Bakayoko and Morata and thinking to himself, these are the best sort of players we could possibly sign and things might be okay. It hasn't turned out as such, and I can't see Chelsea upping the ante in terms of the level of player they can sign this summer.
No. I think the signs are... I mean, Chelsea spent big last summer, but they spent big on a lot of players and never really landed the big one. Though you have to say the price tags for Bakayoko and Morata are actually quite big. But I think what you've got with Chelsea, that you're slightly operating in this thing where, having been the richest kid in town, they're something of a poor little rich kid. They can't go out and buy Neymar. They can't go out and buy, Antoine Griezmann or players like that these days. Eden Hazard is talking about the fact that the club are inconsistent and sometimes it's not happening for them. Well, he could be talking about himself personally at that point, couldn't he? Because Hazard, I think we'd all agree, would probably be among the top 3 most gifted players in the Premier League, but still hasn't turned it around consistently. You know, he's had one great season, then he's had a poor season, then this season you'd have to say he had an okay season, but nothing compared to the previous season. At a certain point, when players say things like that, do they look to themselves and think, maybe I should have been the guy going out inspiring the players as I am supposed to be the best player? That doesn't seem to have been the case with Hazard. He's looking for the exit. I think he's 27, so, the last big move. Many times over, we've talked about the fact that he might be looking at Real Madrid. Perhaps that chance has gone. PSG is a club that might interest him. To me, those comments look like a player putting himself out for tender and a player dissatisfied with Chelsea. The way things are at Chelsea, with the way things at the manager are, it does seem open season for people to be able to say how bad things are. When they get the next manager in, that'll probably change. Whether Hazard's a part of it, I don't know. For Chelsea to spend big, they might have to sell Hazard to actually be able to do that.
I want to move on to the situation at Everton. It looked like Big Sam at Everton was perhaps a match made in heaven. I thought at the start, Owen correctly identified that wasn't going to work out.
What a shock.
Marco Silva, though, certainly that looks like an upgrade and somebody who everybody could get behind and really believe that the club have the right manager and some of the infrastructure that you need to be the 6th best team in the Premier League.
Yes. Well, I'd question your original judgment there, Jer. The thing is, Allardyce and Everton, one of the strange things about that move when he went there was they needed a manager to save the club. But all it took was a couple of games to pull them out of the safety. Pull them to safety, and then what do we have? Well, you've got a season of Sam Allardyce football. And Everton, like so many places, is a demanding support base. And Allardyce has made himself very unpopular there. I think you actually consider the comments that he's made over the season. I think one of the things, I think they fall into two stools. I think there's a case where you could be saying that he's almost trolling the fans by talking about how good the football is and how great things are at the club and how he wants to stay forever. And then there's a personal pride thing. I think one of the things that I do know about Sam Allardyce is that he was really hurt by what happened by England. He never thought that he would get a big club again. And Everton, historically, to someone of Sam Allardyce's age, that's a big club. But it hasn't worked out for him because, unfortunately, leopards don't change the spots. Old dogs don't learn new tricks. And Sam Allardyce brought his brand of football to Everton, a place where the fans don't want that. Moving on to Marco Silva, that is one of those things where I was at a game back in November, I'd say, where Marco Silva was pretty much nailed on to go to Everton. It was at this point they were negotiating how much the compensation was going to be. I think the next day, actually, Watford pulled out of that deal. and then got very annoyed with Everton. I think there's going to be some compensation owing, even though they sacked Silva not long after that game, actually. Silva himself, I saw quite a bit of him at Hull last season, started off very impressively, but then when it actually came to it, Hull had the chance to pull themselves out of safety, and they blew it. They lost 2-0 to Sunderland. At Watford, they played some great football at the start of the season, but then things started to come awry. I think if you actually look at his away record as a manager, it's absolutely hopeless in English football. I'm not sure that Marco Silva is quite the golden ticket that Farhad Moshiri, the Everton owner, appears to think he is. That's an interesting one. I think Everton as a club could do better than as a manager than Marco Silva. One of the people mentioned is Paulo Fonseca, the Shakhtar manager, who you might have seen pictures of him in a car coming out of David Sullivan's mansion the other day, the West Ham owner. So he's a man in demand. It's whether Everton or West Ham are the bigger call. For me, I will go to Everton over West Ham.
The second last thing we want to talk to you about this morning, John, is Pep Guardiola. He was on Monday Night Football on a Tuesday night last night, chatting about the season as a whole. There wasn't a whole amount of explosivity about what he was talking about. He kind of looked into some of the things, the secrets behind it, but not really. And he talked about, having a target on their back next season. And I guess the most interesting thing that Pep talked about last night was Manchester United and how he actually enjoys watching Manchester United play, which I guess you could say is just, being generous to his nearest rivals, doesn't want to give anything away, doesn't want to get too ahead of himself and kind of slam Jose Mourinho, because there's no reward in that after you just had one of the greatest Premier League seasons in history. I think that Pep Guardiola genuinely is intrigued by how Jose Mourinho sets up with his Manchester United team. I would go as far as to say that he's almost confused by it, but that doesn't mean that he's not entertained by it.
Yeah, it's almost like, I don't know, how would you put this? He's trying to understand something that is completely anathema to him. Like reading a book by a politician of a different leaning to you. Like me read, I once read Margaret Thatcher's Downing Street Years, for example, something like that. Yes, I watched a bit of that last night, and Pep Guardiola, actually I found quite engaging and quite honest, actually. There was one point where he was asked about the style of play that he'd chosen and the tactics that he'd chosen, which were about closing teams down and then attacking all at once and all that type of thing. And he gave what I thought was a very honest answer, which was, what changed between your first season at Manchester City to the second season? And he actually said money. Money was what changed him. People say that, but I can't deny the fact that we were able to buy better players with the amount of money we spent. So that was very honest, actually, very honest. And I was quite impressed by that. But I wasn't as impressed by it as Gary Neville, who looked like he was learning at the feet of some kind of, deity. He was completely and utterly in awe of Pep Guardiola. Perhaps that's as a measure of his own misadventures in management or, his own interest in coaching. But, I suppose the thing that I did notice was how much Gary Neville took from that particular TV programme.
We started by talking about the England World Cup squad. We're going to finish by talking about two squads who believe they've got a realistic chance of winning it, and that is Brazil and Argentina. Apparently, Leo Messi is effectively a selector at this point, but the big news really is that Neymar is going to be fit to play in the World Cup. What are the odds on Neymar breaking Messi's heart?
I mean, Brazil, if you'd gone back 6 months ago, you would have said Brazil were clear favourites under the coach that they've got, the standard of play that they were producing. How do we pronounce his name? Is it Chiche, the coach? I think that's right, isn't it? Yes. But then Dani Alves breaks down in the French Cup final last week. Neymar is essentially doing a Wayne Rooney 2006, coming back from a broken foot. We all remember how that ended up. I think Argentina's greatest problem is Argentina. A phalanx of attacking stars, but in defence, Argentina, I always think of the team of great defenders, Roberto Ayala, Daniel Passarella, those type of players. They just don't have those type of players these days. They're just not that great in defence. And Javier Mascherano, a player that I hugely respect, is certainly past his best. So, Brazil and Argentina are always the favourites, aren't they, going into these tournaments? But I think both of them have their problems. And what you've got, actually, the fact you mentioned Neymar and Messi are just two huge, I suppose, international conglomerates running countries for them in those two players. I would be very interested to see Neymar's performances in some of the friendlies if he's going to appear in any of them.
Yeah. Like, we obviously we were very excited about the World Cup, and that's what we're kind of most looking forward to if Neymar and Messi do cross paths, because of the story that we've had over the past 24 hours, that we do have a realistic possibility that Neymar is going to join Real Madrid. Messi's already been on the record about this. He says he has told Neymar, or he says, I've already told him what I think. And I think you and I, John, we can both kind of guess what Messi thinks about Neymar joining Real Madrid. I think Neymar will be at the top of Messi's hatred list should he actually join Real Madrid. It is a rivalry we need. It will only make La Liga even better than it already is. Neymar joining Real Madrid would be brilliant for football, but bad for Lionel Messi's feelings, I guess.
I'm sure he'll get over it. The thing is, Neymar and Cristiano Ronaldo, are they going to have to build two dressing rooms? I mean, that is going to be interesting. And I can't believe I'm saying this, I have some element of sympathy for PSG. I mean, they've been pretty much used as a holding pen for Neymar over the past year. He picked up an injury, and then the story I remember actually was when PSG were actually playing Real Madrid in the Champions League, and they were trying to, I suppose, kid on Real that Neymar might play. The Brazilian Football Federation held a press conference to announce that Neymar's season was over and that he won't be able to play any more of that football for them. I think PSG have been used and abused, perhaps willingly in a certain point, but by Neymar. If I'm honest, I wouldn't want Neymar anywhere near a club that I supported, because I think he is problematic. It may not actually be the individual himself, but certainly the circus around him is a big problem for me. So I wish Real Madrid good luck with him. I really do.
Good stuff, John. Thanks a million. Cheers.
Cheers, lads.